You don't know, you better ask somebody. You listening to the Powell Movement.
Welcome to the Powell Movement. I'm your host, Mike Powell, and by the time this podcast is live, I'll be on the beach in Maui. This was the vacation that we planned for last April, and it was wiped out by the pandemic. But for us vaccinated folks, the pandemic is kind of over. Sure, we may know people who are going to die because they choose not to get vaccinated, but we can't do anything about them. So I wish those folks good luck. And for us, I'm excited for all the fun we're going to have. And I'm also excited for all the single vaccinated people out there who really had a lonely year last year. It's time for you to party your faces off, make questionable decisions, and live with the consequences. For my family, or at least for my kid, this week is the week that he turns 12 years old, and he sure is excited to get this vaccine as a present. I mean, when I was 12, all I wanted was a ColecoVision or something. But it's sad that in this day and age, the one gift my son wants is a vaccination so he can get back to his normal life, which we've pretty much already gotten back to. But my guest this week, when he was 12 years old, he was pretty much already an adult. Ross Powers is a kid who came from nothing, and he grew up with a new sport, snowboarding. And Ross not only grew up with snowboarding, he dominated. So much so that during his career, there was a 5-year run where he was on the podium almost every single weekend, and he has 2 Olympic medals to show for that dominance that he had. This podcast is really a rags to riches story in snowboarding, and I'm not going to spoil it any more than I've already have. So before we get into it, I need to ask you to tell a friend about the show. I'm not a pro athlete or a personality with a built-in audience, but I do have a pretty rad podcast that I believe your friends are going to like, if they know about it. So I want to ask you to let them know about it. I also want to ask you to follow me on Instagram at The Powell Movement. And finally, please support my amazing sponsors who make this thing happen. They're the Barrel Brewery, Stanley, Alpine Vans, Rollerblade, and Peter Glenn Ski and Sports. Now, let's talk to Ross Powers.
Hey, Mike.
How's it going, man?
Good. How are you doing?
Oh, good, thank you.
Nice. I was just grabbing my landline phone just in case. How's this one sound?
You sound perfect.
Oh, good.
And with these, I edit a little bit, but I won't change what we say. I just make it so we both sound like we're really smart, even though I might not be.
Sounds good.
I guess I'll just start it out with, I kind of started out with like a little icebreaker, but something that most people in snowboarding will never ever get to say, and something you can say, is that they are a member of the U.S. Ski and Snowboard Hall of Fame and the Vermont Sports Hall of Fame. Are either of these things a big deal to you?
Yeah, definitely. It's an honor being inducted into both of them. Yeah, first I was inducted into the Vermont Museum Ski and Snowboard Hall of Fame. That was definitely an honor. You know, some of my heroes, Jeff Brushy, Burton Carpenters, all people have. And, you know, I'm one of the earlier snowboarders. So, yeah, definitely an honor to be inducted in that. And then the U.S. Ski and Snowboard Hall of Fame, you know, that's a big one because, you know, it's the whole country combined.
It is, and I'm one of the few losers in this world that really pay a lot of attention to the U.S. Ski and Snowboard Hall of Fame because I have a big problem with some of the selections they have for folks getting in every year. And while I do believe that you should be in, it is totally crazy to me that you get in before Sean Palmer, before Tom Sims, before Damian Sanders, before the Egan brothers. Do you ever think about that and just think that's wild?
I do, and to tell you the truth, I've reached out to Sean Palmer, Terry Kidwell, Jeff Brushy, Andy Coughlin, all these guys, and how you go about it, you have to fill out a nomination form. And Scott Clarkson, who I used to do some stuff with at Okemo, and then he was on to Crested Butte, he, with my helped fill out all those forms, which was very nice of him, and that's how that got the ball rolling for me. And I felt the same way as you, so I reached out to, you know, a bunch of my heroes and legendary people in the sport, and none of them got back to me to help me fill out the forms. So I still have partial filled out forms for Jeff Brushy, Andy Coughlin, Terry Kidwell, Sean Palmer, and just if you guys are listening, reach out to me. I'd love to nominate all you guys and get you in there as well.
And if you're listening and you're with the Hall of Fame, do what's right. And even if Ross doesn't sign these guys up to get into a hall that they belong in, put the people who deserve to be in the Hall of Fame in the Hall of Fame, because there are some people that everyone knows deserves to be in. But before you can make the Hall of Fame, you have to accomplish a ton of stuff in life. And for you, it all starts in Bennington. You grew up in Londonderry, Vermont. And is that just small town USA, like one stop sign kind of place or one stoplight kind of place?
Yeah, I grew up most of my life in South Londonderry. Don't live too far from there now, up on Stratton Mountain now. And yeah, small town. Actually, there was a couple stop signs there. But yeah, definitely a small town. Was born in Bennington, Vermont. Grew up in South Londonderry most of my childhood, and yeah, living close there now. I'd say the biggest thing to help my career, and snowboarding wasn't even a big sport when I was younger, and I kind of feel like I grew up with it. My mom worked at Bromley Ski Area in the cafeteria, and actually still does part time today. And I like to say Bromley was my babysitter every weekend, every holiday. I was with my mom there. Started out skiing, and then I was into skateboarding at the time. And at the end of the day, I noticed some of the lift attendants coming down on snowboards. And I've seen some of the snowboards and some of the skateboard magazines and stuff. And I'm like, oh my God, I want to do that. And, after a little more research, Burton Snowboards was right down the road in Manchester, Vermont. And I believe it was Christmas of '87. My mom, a friend of hers at work, son worked at Burton Snowboard Factory and showroom in Manchester. And he got her a discount, and my mom got us this Burton Elite 130, smallest board Burton made at the time, for my brother Trevor and I. And that day, opened Christmas presents early because my mom had to work. Went out on the back hill. I don't even know if it was light yet. Tried out, and then went to the mountain. It was a rainy day, and spent the whole day just trying to figure it out. Definitely spent more time on my butt sliding down the mountain than riding down on the board. But from that day, I was hooked.
Cool. And before that can even happen, growing up for you, one thing that makes you different than most snowboarders that I have on the show is that your life isn't like mom, dad, white picket fence, and an easy childhood that most riders have. It's like you have a Vietnam dad who sounds like he quit the family for booze. And was he around at all when you were a kid?
Yeah, now, when I was younger, I want to say probably, gosh, maybe around 5 when we moved to South Londonderry is when he left and went out west and wasn't part of our lives. And, luckily had a great mom, and I owe so much to her. And my brother Trevor, who's 2 years younger than me. So, yeah, we pretty much grew up with my mom. We didn't have a lot of money, but she had a lot of love. And luckily she worked at a ski area, and I fell in love with snowboarding, and, it just all kind of went from there.
Yeah, and the whole dad thing's something interesting because I grew up with one, so it's just seemed normal to me. But with you not having a dad growing up, when you're old enough to understand the whole thing, are you kind of like, fuck that guy, or do you want to have a relationship with him? How does that work?
Yeah, I mean, he left when I was younger. I think when I was in 8th grade, there was an event out in Vail, US ASA Nationals, I believe. And I was staying with my uncle out there, and my dad came to have dinner with us one night. It was kind of weird. He hadn't been too much a part of it, and he tried to send some letters over the years and definitely reached out after Olympics and all that kind of stuff. But, I just grew up with my mom, and she gave us all that we needed. But yeah, I took a lot of that as I became a dad and a father, just to, be the best I could be and spend the time with my daughters and introduce them to everything I can and support whatever they chose.
Awesome. Well, I think that, what wasn't awesome was not just not having a dad, because that seems like you're able to get through that without an issue. But from birth on, I think from like 8 weeks old on, you have some conditions that make you pretty awkward, like you're in leg braces and you don't walk correctly. Is that true?
Yeah, definitely. I had a severe case of I was pigeon-toed, and my right foot turned in a lot, and I, had a hard time walking when I was a kid, and I don't remember it much, to tell you the truth. I think I was in Montessori school, so before kindergarten, and I see a picture back from then, and I had the brace that went around the hips, the metal rod that went down to try to straighten my foot, and I think it was, I don't know, just it was awkward to try to do stuff in and play with. And finally, my mom's like, enough of this thing. You just have fun and be a kid and do whatever. And my grade school days, I'd see my tracks in the snow, like having my one foot sideways. You could always tell it was me. And then I kind of made a habit of just trying to point my toes forward and, especially that right one out even more to make it so it actually would kind of go forward, and feel like it's pretty, normal now. But yeah, definitely haven't thought about that much. But I remember my mom at the doctor, she's like, some of the best athletes are pigeon-toed, Michael Jordan and other people. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what the doctor told my mom.
Well, I have ADD, and they told me that some of the smartest people in the world were ADD, but I think they just told me that to shut me up.
Yeah, that probably me too.
Once you figure out walking, is it like risk-taking Ross born? Do things change?
No, I mean, I never thought I couldn't walk. Yeah, I probably ran around a little funny and walked a little funny, but I did all the different sports growing up. soccer, swimming. I rode my bike a lot, skateboarded, a little basketball, baseball, whatever their sport there was. I mean, I loved all sports and did all I could.
And your mom, so she works her ass off at the mountain to support you and your brother. And I would think you two probably have a lot of time on your hands being at the mountain or at home because your mom's working a lot. And is she a skier or a snowboarder, or is she just doing it to pay the bills?
Yeah, my mom grew up in Cape Cod and then, moved to Vermont and started working at Bromley. I believe my dad worked there too, before I was born on the ski patrol and different things. And yeah, my mom got into skiing. She was a skier, and I think she started snowboarding with us when she turned 50. And she still will get out there and ride some today. So it's pretty awesome. She's 72 now.
Oh, dang. So she's working in the cafeteria, and is life a struggle at all? Because you have a single mom who works in a cafeteria. I'm sure the income isn't huge from food services. So is it a struggle, or does like the cafeteria provide in terms of food and stuff like that? You don't have to worry about the little things in life?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely was a struggle. We just lived a simple life. Grew up right next to the Londonderry Inn. So in the evenings, the people that own the Londonderry Inn, the Kavanaughs, my mom would babysit their two boys who were close. I mean, their son Charlie's my age, and their son Tom's a couple years younger than my brother. So my mom would babysit them at night for our apartment to stay in. So yeah, she just worked her butt off and gave us what opportunities she could. When I got into competing a little bit in the Green Mountain Series, when that started up, it was like, okay, we had a budget. If you're going to do these events, we got to only be able to get these groceries, this and that. And yeah, Bromley would send home some stuff once in a while. Like I remember some stuff that would be about to expire, just expired, that kind of stuff for us to have. So yeah, supportive. And then I think the first time I traveled, I want to say I was in fifth grade going out to USASA Nationals in California, the first one they had. The local Bromley Outing Club, I think they gave us a $500 grant scholarship to go out there and be able to compete. So there was definitely some support here and there, and did what we could, and didn't get to do it all, but definitely enough to have a great childhood and really respect my mom for all she did.
Yeah, it sounds like she got you everything you needed. And the most important thing was that snowboard when I think you were around 7 years old. Your brother was a little bit younger. And you not only get good on a snowboard quickly, but your life, like you kind of mentioned, it's timed perfectly for the sport. It's like you figure out how to ride in the second and third grade. And then once you have that dialed, the Green Mountain Series starts up. And there are some heavy hitters in that whole world. And who are the older folks that you're getting to see and get inspired by?
Yeah, so I remember, at Bromley, there were two snowboard instructors, Tyler Hidrich and Kurt Meyer. And the day before my first competition, my mom let me skip school, and Kurt set some bamboo poles on Bromley for me to go around. I think the competition was going to be a slalom event. And just to get the feel of going around gates, obviously could turn a snowboard and all that. And then, went and did my first Green Mountain Series, which is the USASA Southern Vermont Series now. Stratton had an earlier program than a lot of other mountains. So they had a little competition team up there that Susie Ruick ran, and she started the Green Mountain Series. So she let me come up and train there. There was a man that knew my mom and dad, Paul Johnston, that worked at Stratton at the time, and he'd get me a pass and he would give me rides to the mountain sometimes so I could go up there and do a little training with Susie's team and do some of the Green Mountain Series events.
And growing up in Londonderry and being near Burton and Stratton, are you able to be closer to the sport than, say, some kid in the Midwest? Like, do you get to see the pros more and have more interactions with the Burton brand?
Yeah, I'd say, when I was growing up as a kid, Burton was right down the road in Manchester, Vermont. I think even before I knew what snowboarding was, Jake had a shop in South Londonderry and different places around the area. But yeah, I loved the showroom and factory down in Manchester. They'd be great. I'd go down there and they'd give my mom a board for me to ride on the weekends for certain disciplines. I think it was when I was in fifth grade, I started riding for Burton officially. I remember getting a one-page letter from Jake, giving me a board and some gear a year. So I had some early support from them. But yeah, definitely all the guys when they were back in town, US Open was always at Stratton. Bromley's the closest mountain to Manchester, so they'd be up there riding. A lot of top guys, Jeff Brushy, Jason Ford, Noah Brandon, a lot of those guys lived in Vermont. So when they weren't out on the circuit or traveling, they would be back at some of the mountains. And Stratton had an early half pipe that just so many people would come ride back in the day.
So from early on, when you see all those guys riding that half pipe and you just see people on the mountain that are pro level, Do you realize you want to be a snowboarder? Like if people asked you when you're in 4th grade, what do you want to be when you're older? Do you say, I'm going to be a professional snowboarder?
Yeah, definitely. I think I remember in 6th grade, my math teacher like asking us what we wanted to be, and I said a snowboarder. She kind of laughed at me, but I was dedicated. I loved it. That's what I wanted to do, and I was lucky enough to follow my dreams and grow up in a sport, and still love the sport as much today.
But it's crazy because like the X Games hadn't even happened yet. There really wasn't a clear path on how to become a pro at that point. But you still have the dream. And I think the first big moment that people talk about when they talk about your career is your first US Open. And while that's a big moment for a ton of people's career, it's different for you because you're 9 years old. It's like 1989. And your 4th grade teacher brought the whole class to watch you ride. Was that like a big deal and a crazy experience altogether and a self-esteem builder too, to have your whole class there watching you kill it?
Yeah, it was pretty cool. Back then the US Open wasn't as big as it was years later. So how they did it is in the morning, they'd have some qualifiers. And then if you make it in, it was like a true US Open. Like you could get in and compete with all the pros and everything. So I was able to go up there, and I think I, did well in my age group and got to compete in front of my 4th grade class. Yeah, Miss Housekeeper, she was my 4th grade teacher and probably my favorite teacher of all time. I thought that was really cool what she did. And she was friends with some of the pros, Andy Coughlin and them, and he had to come up and support me and show the class the US Open at a young age was really, really awesome.
Is that where you catch the attention of Jake at that US Open? Is that where that letter comes from and that's where the boards come from?
I think it might have been. I think just being in the area, being probably one of the youngest riders and just always up at the mountain, and, the Burton crew's up there and between Stratton and doing the early Green Mountain series. Yeah, I think just being around the area, but that probably definitely helped as well.
And is there any interaction with the brand other than the board they're giving you? Or are you going to the office and just super gromming out over the neighborhood brand?
Those days, anytime Burton did an event, they'd have sometimes in the summer, I remember they'd bring a trampoline before they were easy to get like nowadays. And some of the pros, Jeff Brushy and all those guys would be jump, and we'd all get to jump on it. So I'd be down to the shop as much as I could, and just studying that catalog and, looking through the magazines and doing everything I could. I just love snowboarding and dream of doing what a lot of those guys did when I got older.
And those guys, they're getting covers of magazines and they're traveling the world, but you're getting exposure as well. I think there's Boys Life. And is it through Burton's PR machine that you're getting some coverage as a young kid? Because I think there were some covers when you were just like a little guy. Yeah,
I got some coverage. I think the first time I was in a Trans World was after that first USASA Nationals out in Snow Valley, California, and made it on the USASA first, like their national team, where they took people that won their age groups, and we got to go out to Mount Hood and do a little summer camp. So that kind of started it off. We had a local magazine, Eastern Edge, when I was growing up through grade school and high school. Started getting some coverage there. Definitely got some coverage through Burton. And then my freshman year at Stratton Mountain School, at the end of the year, I think it must have been in March, out in June Mountain, California, USSA, which is now US Ski and Snowboard, had their first ever open nationals, and whoever did well there was a slalom, a GS, and a half pipe, made it on the first ever US snowboard team. And the next year is when the World Cup started up. Once I got on that, that's when things really started to be bigger and outside of Vermont.
It's time for my first sponsor break, and the 10 Barrel Brewery has done so much for action sports since they started brewing the Northwest's best beer in 2006. But what they've just done is truly game-changing. They've introduced a new German-inspired Pilsner to their lineup. And while Profuse Juice used to be my favorite, I love this Pilsner and will be drinking a lot of it this summer. It's light, refreshing, crisp, clean, and it has an aftertaste that I can't quite put my finger on, but it reminds me of drinking beer in my 20s, and that's awesome. It's tasty, it's nostalgic, and it's what you should try next time you're at the store. You can find out more about 10 Barrel, their events, their athletes, and the all-new Pilsner over at 10barrel.com. My next sponsor is Alpine Vans. They are the brand that Cody Townsend trusted to build his vehicle for the 50 project. And Cody now has an edit out on that build, and it's 14 minutes of awesomeness, and it really shows you why going with Alpine Vans on your Sprinter buy and build will be the best choice you make for your adventures, period. Cody's build is so sick, and every detail was thought of. And why is that? That's because the guys at Alpine know the features you need to live comfortably without sacrificing anything, because they know adventure life firsthand. From living at the ski resort to bike trips to surf, Alpine has lived it and knows what it takes to make your vehicle a functional home. And even with this electronics shortage, where it's hard to get your hands on a Sprinter, Alpine has an inventory of 8 vehicles ready to turn into your dream adventure mobile. I encourage you to head over to alpinevans.com and check out their impressive quote builder, which asks you the right questions to make sure your build is both what you need and what you want. My final sponsor is Stanley. And if you aren't ready for your camping, hiking, and general outdoor adventure needs yet, it's time to get on it. And you and yours deserve the best stuff out there. And Stanley has been setting the industry standard of innovation and quality and getting you out there since 1913. By listening to the Powell Movement, you're going to get the best deal you'll find on all Stanley products anywhere. It's through this podcast. I'll get you 30% off everything Stanley. All you need to do is head on over to stanley1913.com, go shopping, and use the code drinkfast. That's all one word, all lowercase at checkout, and you'll get that deal. Spend over $100 and I'll throw in a limited edition Powell Movement beanie. So please support the folks at Stanley and make sure you're dialed in for the summer. Those are my sponsors. Now let's jump back into the podcast. When you get on the U.S. team, does that change anything for you? Because I know that travel's not easy for you. You need scholarships and stuff to go to that national championships, that first one that you go to. And does the U.S. team help you out? Does Burton help you out? Does anybody realize the situation that you're in where you're not one of those snowboarders that has 4 cars in their garage and can do whatever they want? Do they realize that?
Yeah. So, I started that relationship with Burton when I was in 5th grade. That grew a little bit each year. It went from, 1 board to maybe 2 boards to if you do well in events, you'll get a little bit of incentives to put towards other events. There was a local shop at the time, Mountain Surf down in Manchester. They'd help me out a little bit with events. And then it was when I made the U.S. team that Burton definitely supported me some, but the U.S. team kind of covered all the travel to the World Cups and camps and everything else. And that's what really, really gave me that opportunity to travel internationally and compete at a higher level.
Nice. And another place where I think you got help to make things happen is with high school, because you mentioned that you ended up going to, I think, the SMS, the Stratton Mountain School. And with the whole academy thing, your life timed perfectly again, where it seemed like these ski academies were starting to open up programs for snowboarders, and you happened to time that perfectly. You find Stratton. How are you able to figure out a plan to get yourself in there? Because those places aren't cheap. They're like really expensive, actually.
Yeah, just growing up in the sport and lucked out again. So the year when I was finishing up 8th grade, Stratton Mountain School, Ski Snowboard Academy, or at the time it was just a ski academy with Alpine and cross-country Nordic racing, and they were starting a snowboard program. Scott Palmer, who actually was a pro rider for Burton, also worked at Burton, built a lot of boards. At the time, he was working up at CVA, Carrabassett Valley Academy, under Eric Webster. And Scott was contacted to start the program at Stratton. And he contacted me to see if I'd have interest. Obviously, I didn't have all the finances, but luckily I did grow up in South Londonderry, which is a school choice town. In our area, a lot of the towns aren't big enough to have a high school. So the town will give you money towards any of the surrounding high schools.
Huh.
So that covered a good chunk of it. And then, yeah, they definitely gave me a scholarship and I would go up there. I remember I'd ride my bike up to school some days and clean trash, move books, do everything to just kind of work towards, my tuition there.
It's amazing because you had a totally different experience than almost every snowboarder. And I feel like I'm painting a picture like, oh, poor Ross who has to work so hard. But it's true. We're like, all of your peers, nobody had the same upbringing that you had, I would think. Maybe 1 or 2, but probably wasn't talked about and you didn't really hear about in the media. But like, you're having to work summers, you're having to figure out ways to get your tuition paid for, and then you have to figure out ways to get all over the country to make things happen. And you do that, which is a tough thing to do for like a young kid. So you're traveling from nationals each year, you're going all over New England to full on all over the US and then global travel. Does this all feel like it's happening so fast? Like you're 14, 15, you get on the US team and then boom, everything just starts happening?
Yeah. I kind of like to say I grew up with the sport and just kind of got lucky. When I first got into snowboarding and probably was trying it in the back hills of the Londonderry Inn with my friend, I don't even think a lot of the mountains allowed snowboarding. And then to go to the mountains allowing snowboarding, to competitions, to then, Stratton Mountain School allowing snowboarding, the U.S. team starting up, the World Cup, everything. Yeah, it's wild. First X Games, first Olympics, it's just, I kind of got lucky. And like you said, yeah, just growing up in the sport and, taking advantage of those opportunities.
Yeah, so you're on the road as a teenager. And what's that like? I mean, do you have people to hang out with? Or are you stuck in the hotel because everybody else is out partying? Or how does that work?
That first year on the World Cup, I was 15 years old, and I remember it felt like I left for like 2 months. We were over in Europe for a while, to Japan, to Canada, the US, all over. And the main thing, we were all just into snowboarding. We just wanted to ride, and we were getting to ride all these different spots. And, half pipes were starting to get better and better. The whole team, they all took me under their wing, and it was great.
So everybody was cool to you. You weren't stealing anybody's thunder because, by the time you're 16, you finished your rookie season second in the world. And it could create animosity amongst the older guys who are trying to jockey for those positions, but they just take you under their wing because you're a super nice kid at that point? And always, really?
Yeah, we just all pushed one another, and, we were definitely all individually want to do the best we could. But when your teammates did well, you'd support them. And I think that's the reason why a sport like snowboarding, the progression rate's so high, is because you're competing against one another in that fun, friendly, competitive way. But at the same time, you're almost competing against yourself to do the best you can do. And, if your friends have a good day, you cheer them on, and hopefully they do the same when you see how they in reverse.
And it was a totally different time back then. And when I talked to a lot of people about it, it sounds like it was, I don't want to say more fun, but it sounds like it was more fun. People were going out. It wasn't like people were serious athletes in the gym all day, focused on doing well. I'm sure there was definitely a focus on doing well, but there was also time to have fun. And there was a wild side of snowboarding as well. Do you see the debauchery going on around you? And do you start joining in when you're 17, 18 years old? How does that work out?
Once you got on the U.S. team, yeah, there was definitely, the main thing was snowboarding hard. But you'd have to train. We'd have some trainers, and you'd have to do the physical testing. You had to do all that stuff that came, from the ski racing side of things. So, we were definitely training, taking care of ourselves, riding as hard as we could. But yeah, we were celebrating and being over in Europe at early ages, and, a lot of parties. Yeah, definitely, would do some of that. But the main focus was doing the best you could in the events and learning new tricks and progressing your riding.
Okay. And at 17, your riding has progressed to the point where you're the FIS world champion. And at that time, there were two tours. There's the ISF and the FIS. And the FIS is run by skiers, and the most influential snowboarders in the world are totally against the series, it seems like. Did you like one or the other better?
Being on the U.S. team, that's when the FIS World Cup started up. So that's kind of where I got my start, and it gave me the opportunity to get out there and push myself and get my riding to a level. So once I did start doing more of the ISF, I was able to compete with those guys, and it started all kind of coming together for qualifications for the 98 Olympics. So to do that with those guys, and then I think in 2000, I won the ISF World Championship title in the halfpipe.
What I want to know is, how did snowboarders let a bunch of skiers take control of their sport in the first place? When that whole thing was starting up and you've got the IFS or the ISF and the FIS, I always call it FIS instead of FIS for some reason. But how does skiing take a hold of your sport?
I think that was the only clear path to having it be in the Olympics. And I think, they were used to doing it with skiing, and it was just an easy way for that whole transition to happen. But it was hard, riding for Burton. I remember, gosh, when was it? It must have been 96-ish or so. I was doing really well, in events, Burton rider, and they banned all of us that did any of the FIS World Cups from the US Open right in my hometown. So there was definitely some challenging times with it, but I just wanted to snowboard and do the best I could.
But that whole thing was total crap. The US Open is a Burton event. You're one of their top riders, given there's the Terje side of Burton as well, and he's one of their top riders as well, but he's not going to go to the Olympics because he's not going to mess with FIS, and he's definitely anti. But when your sponsor, who sponsors him as well, decides that because you're in this other contest series, you're not cool enough to be in the US Open, they may not say it that way, but they're trying to play both sides of the coin. It's like, hey, we're going to kiss Terje's ass here, and we're going to piss Ross off, but it doesn't matter because Ross can go do his Olympic thing, but we have to keep this Terje guy happy. Does it feel like that at all? Given I'm sure you're friends with everybody, but it seems like there are two sides, and it's like a hard play that Burton plays both of them.
Yeah, it's definitely a little disappointing at the time. I think I ended up going over to Japan and doing some stuff with their nationals. But yeah, it's fun. Terje is definitely one of my favorite riders. Yeah, it hurt to be banned from the US Open, but then years later, Burton's the clothing sponsor of the US team in the Olympics to be able to get that exposure. And Terje is running Arctic Challenge events, and you're having to wear the biggest bibs ever and compete in not so great half pipes. But since it's his event, he has the sponsors, then it's okay. It's just one of those games.
Yeah, it has to be totally frustrating because for you, you're a threat to win every event that you're in, and you're not in arguably the most important and core event in the world, which is frustrating because your sponsor is the one that puts that thing on. But whatever, you got to deal with that.
Luckily, it was only 1 year, and was able to come back and win the U.S. Open in 1999, which was huge for me because right around my hometown, Burton's event, something that I've been going to since I was a young kid and watching all the top pros. So to be able to win that in 99 and back it up in 2003 with another win, definitely psyched to have those U.S. Open titles, but just the U.S. Open when it was back at Stratton, just how everyone came together and the crowds and, seeing the new guys and the new gear. And oh gosh, it was awesome.
It almost seemed to me from that whole situation, it's the last I'll talk about it, but like from the outside, there was Terje, who's the best, most stylish, coolest kid in high school. And he is so much of an influence that he makes the entire core of the industry think being in the Olympics is bad for snowboarding. And while that's debatable, when you look back on it 25 years later, what are your thoughts on the Olympics and snowboarding? Has it helped grow the sport more?
Yeah, I think 98 was a little tricky one. We were over in Japan, competed in not the best weather. Back then, it was best 2 runs combined. So people had to take it, you had to land both runs to do well.
Yep.
But 2002, I think that was a game changer and definitely grew our sport and brought a lot of attention to it. We had a perfect half pipe, perfect weather. It was just an awesome time.
From the financial side, I mean, looking at your career, you had 7 pro models with Burton. Did you have one before the Olympics?
My first pro model, I think it was in 2000 because it was after I won the U.S. Open in 99. I think that's when we really got to start talking about it.
Okay.
So it was, after the 98 Olympics, before the 2002 Olympics.
So it'd be hard to say that you sold more boards during Olympic years than non-Olympic years, but whatever. When you look at your whole career, starting in 95, you went on this tear through the Olympics where you're on the podium, it seemed like every week. I mean, literally every week you're on a different podium. Did you have tricks that no one else had that no one else could match? Or are you just going way bigger than everybody else? How are you consistently able to stay on the podium?
Yeah, I think just always trying to progress and push my riding. I think I had the combination of, I did have a lot of tricks, and back then the half pipes weren't as consistent. So depending on the half pipe and where the wall was verti, laid back, anything else, I would figure out where to do certain tricks. So I did have a big bag of tricks. I definitely always tried to push my amplitude, and that combination is definitely what gets you on the podium.
People, especially back then, want to see people go absolutely huge, and you definitely did. That puts you on the podium a lot, which we said, and for a kid who didn't come up with that much money, I would think that money's coming in like you've never seen it before. I mean, how much are you winning in the big contests? Like, what's the biggest oversized check you left with?
A lot of the Grand Prix and stuff back then, if you won, you'd get 10,000, and then I think 5,000 for second, 2,500 for third. So some of the World Cups were around that, maybe a little more, maybe a little less. I think when I won that ISF World Championship, they were really trying to do a big push that year, keep their name in it. That was, I think, 20,000 for the World Champion halfpipe title. I think the USOC gave me 25,000 after my gold in 2002. So yeah, definitely got a couple of big checks. I was usually pretty successful on the Grand Prix series leading up to the Olympics, and yeah, definitely amazing. Yeah, I wished it was still like that, and could earn 10,000 plus a lot of bonuses in a weekend.
Did you have like a match deal with Burton too, where those 10,000 were doubling into 20?
I mean, I don't know if it was quite matched, but yeah, I had some good incentives from Burton and then different sponsors over the years.
Yeah, one interesting sponsor that you had was Ralph Lauren. And I would think you were Burton head to toe at one point, because that seemed what Burton liked to do with everyone. But then you go to Ralph Lauren, and does that piss the folks off at Burton? Like, why aren't you on our clothing?
Yeah, it's one of those things. Rode from Burton. Burton supported me, but, they didn't want to, pay me big like someone like Terje or a lot of people under Terje.
I mean, you're only the Olympic gold medalist, whatever.
Yeah. Or actually, this was before then. Yeah, so I got this opportunity to ride for Ralph Lauren, the RLX line with Michelle Taggart and Andy Hetzel. And it was really cool. I mean, they made good gear. We got to do, great photo shoots, go up to Island Lake Lodge with Mark Gallup and stuff like that. So they were a really good sponsor. They treated me well, and then after the '02 Olympics and winning there, that's, I think, when I got back on Burton head to toe and, was excited to do that as well.
When you're on Ralph Lauren, does your image take a hit being associated with a brand like that? Do you get made fun of a lot by your friends? Is that part of it, just knowing that you're going to go with Ralph Lauren, that happens?
Not really. At the time, I know Seth and those guys were riding for Tommy Hilfiger. And, I think Wescott might have been with people were just coming in from all different sides because snowboarding was really growing during that time. So yeah, Ralph Lauren, they made good gear and enough of it where you could kind of pick what you wanted to wear. I remember they had these cool cargo snow pants. That was a cool thing at the time. So wore those a lot. And then you'd get a stipend where you could go into your local polo shops and be able to get clothes and bedding and everything else. So it was a cool sponsor for sure.
Nice. And then did you also have those brands that just came on and wanted to pay you a lot for an Olympic year? Like, hey, we're going to cash in on him this 1 year and then we're done with him?
I think it was more like if you did well in Olympics, you'd get some gigs like Danny Jeja and I got the Coca-Cola deal with Nestea. What else was there? I remember Sean Palmer was doing Activision Pro Boarder, like the same people that did Tony Hawk Pro Skater.
Yep.
That was a cool one. Yeah, no, a lot of stuff over the years, but, mostly in snowboarding, it was those kind of traditional sponsors, the Burtons and stuff that stayed with you for a long time.
So in those big years, I mean, is $500,000 a realistic thing for a top pro snowboarder like yourself at that point?
Yeah, probably in a couple of years I made around that or more. But yeah, I kind of took time to grow up into it and doesn't last that long. But yes, there was years where I'm sure I made that or more.
And when you feel like you start to have a good amount of money saved in the bank and you think back to your childhood and all the sacrifices that your mom went through to get you where you were, did you do what the pro football players seem to do and athletes do and buy your mom that big gift as appreciation for all the work she put in for you?
Yeah, I always tried to give back to my mom, but my mom is humble and simple. And a lot of the vehicles I won over the year ended up with her. 98, when I went double gold at X Games, winning the slopestyle and half pipe, I won one of those new Volkswagen Beetles for athlete of the X Games. So gave that to my mom. She had that for a long time. And 99, when I won the half-pipe World Cup final in Italy, they gave me a Harley Davidson motorcycle that I gave to my mom, and actually I even took it for a ride. I was over at her house yesterday hanging out with her and took it for a ride. She still rides it around. So yeah, pretty cool.
Oh, that's really, really cool. So you mentioned the X Games, and I'll get off the money tip and we'll start talking about X Games. And the X Games are a huge deal. You've seen the summer version. You really want to be a part of it, I would think. In year one, you're invited and you kind of shit the bed in the first X Games. Was there a reason you didn't ride well at that one?
That one was something new. I remember some of the guys that were riding. I think Todd Richards won it. He was a little older than me, so really competitive a little before I was towards the top, and, competed with him for a while, like through all the 98 qualifiers and 98 Olympics, everything else. So yeah, he rode well there. I remember Daniel Frank going off. I can't remember what I got. I think I got 7th or top 10 anyway, if I remember correctly. So I wasn't psyched about it, but it was something new and I learned for the future, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, the next year it's like domination when you get to X, and you must be in a totally different mindset the year before. Do you kind of come into it the second year? You might not even remember, but do you come into it like, I'm going to win this thing this year because I didn't even podium last year?
Yeah, I think, X Games was something that the first year wasn't that big of a deal. Back then they had modified shovel racing and everything was just about the TV. They didn't care as much about the athletes as they did later in their time, and, building the right venues and features and everything for the sport. That stuff all happened over time. So as they grew and as they started, so did I, and definitely had some good successful times in the X Games for sure.
Now it's time for my final sponsor break, and Peter Glenn Ski and Sports is at it again, giving away something. This week, Peter Glenn has teamed up with On Running Shoes to give away 2 pairs of the new award-winning On Cloudflow shoe. With even more clouds than ever, the On Cloudflow will have you flowing through your next run. It has the iconic CloudTech sole that helps reduce impact, but it upgrades it with a record-breaking 18 clouds and abrasion pads for improved grip. I'm no runner, so David Mahoney over at Peter Glenn sent me a pair of the Roger Federer tennis-inspired shoes from On. Thanks, David. They make me feel like a fresh 80s rapper when I wear them. They're a sick lifestyle shoe for me. But runners, you are going to love the Cloudflow, and winning them is easy. Here's what you need to do. First, make sure you're following both Peter Glenn Sports and on_running on Instagram. Second, like the giveaway post. Third, tag 2 friends who you go running with in the comments. And that's it. That's all you need to do. Remember, 1 entry per person, and the winner will be announced on July 23rd. To find out more about Peter Glenn Ski and Sports, head on over to peterglenn.com. My final sponsor is Rollerblade, and it's summertime. There's no better time to get out there and go skate than right now. Whether you find yourself using skating for fitness, skating the streets or skate parks, or heading out for marathon skate sessions, Rollerblade has the best skates on the market. I mean, these guys invented inline skating. And when they can't skate, they ski. And if you're a skier, Rollerblade also has a skate-to-ski program that they built out to get you in shape for ski season. It's the best crossover tool ever invented, and it will get your legs in much better shape than biking or running could ever do. To find out about the app, head on over to the App Store to download it, and to see the latest and greatest from Rollerblade, head on over to rollerblade.com. Those are my sponsors. Now let's jump back into the podcast. That next year you do something that won't happen again until Shaun White. You win both slope and pipe. And that has to be something that's pretty rewarding because I look at half pipe, it's all training and tricks and you have to be in great shape. And then slope style is more like the style of the sport, I feel like. And I don't know, not everybody can be a half pipe rider, but everybody can get on the slope style course and throw their tricks down. And to be able to win both of them, it just shows that you're an all-around rider still, in 99 that can just destroy anything. Does that just make you feel good about where your career has gone?
For sure. Yeah, starting at snowboarding when I did, we were happy to ride anything. And a lot of the events, at the beginning were Alpine races because that's what they knew from skiing and that's what they could set up. And, then they started doing some half pipes and then some jumps and slope styles and everything else. So I grew up riding everything. I still promote that with my team today, just all around riding and trying to, be able to ride all features and all mountain. That definitely helped me do that in 98.
And while there's a huge respect for your talent out there, I feel like there might not have been the full acceptance from the snowboard media. I mean, did you ever feel that way? Did you ever get that big Trans World interview that people hang their hats on?
Yeah, I feel like I accomplished pretty much most that I could. Yeah, I believe I got the interviews in the Trans Worlds and Snowboarders and covers on both of them over the years. So definitely had that support. But, there was a time where people were starting to do more stuff outside of competitions. And, I tried to be the best all-around rider I could. But, when you get to a certain age and time, you focus on kind of what you're good at and have fun doing the other stuff. So, yeah, no, I feel like I had a good career, good support, and thankful for it.
Your career is going to be defined by the Olympics. When people look back on it, they're going to be like, oh man, Olympic bronze medalist, Olympic gold medalist. And when that first Olympics rolls around, based on the results I looked at, I would think it would be easy for you to make the team. Was there any challenge or was it kind of like a shoo-in that you were going to be on this team?
I would say every Olympic qualifier, even today, I mean, you never really know.
Well, it's harder today, I would think, than back then. I mean, if you had the tricks and the amplitude back then, there was a clear, hey, these 3 guys are probably going to make the team. But if you look at it today, there's 14 guys that can make the team. And if you have a bad day, you're not going to the Olympics almost.
Yeah, I mean, I'd even say in 98 it was that way. I mean, there were so many good riders. And then, yeah, I think I did all right up at Sugarloaf was the first Grand Prix. How they do it is they have this Grand Prix series, and whoever does the best out of those gets to go to the Olympics. Now they've changed it a little bit, and there's other World Snowboard Tour points list and different ways to make the team. It's not just the Grand Prix like it used to be. So you used to have to be on it in those Grand Prix, and that was your only chance to make it.
Okay. So since it wasn't, I mean, I guess it was a challenge, but it wasn't, a huge challenge to make the team, I would think, because you're riding really well. But when you make the team, do you just kind of treat it like another contest and not realize how special it is that first time around?
Yeah, in 98, I didn't really know what to expect. So I remember making the team out in Mammoth. I think I won the last qualifier, so secured my spot. And then I stayed out there. Our coach at the time was Peter Del Giudice, and I didn't really have time to come home. So I stayed out there to train a little bit. And I remember there was a huge snowstorm when we were supposed to go to the airport, and we couldn't go the normal way to Reno and had to go through Bishop and these back roads and somehow made our flight, luckily, and went over to the Olympics. And I guess I didn't realize how big it was until I came home. And then after the Olympics, it's just everyone from childhood to teachers to family, and everyone's reaching out to you. I grew up in a small town, just going to the grocery store was always a task. So, over there, it kind of did seem like just another snowboard event because it was most of the guys, that were just doing the World Cup at the time. And we were up in the mountains and staying in a hotel with just the snowboarders like we did at a World Cup. But yeah, no, after realized how big it was. And that first Olympics, I think we left early. We didn't go to closing ceremonies. Yeah, definitely got to go do some cool things, go to some of the other events. But I said, if I ever make it back to the Olympics, I'm going to go for the whole shebang, open and closing, and make the most of it.
And the one thing I think that does happen in that first Olympics is there's a ton of press around it, and you're a medalist, so you're going to be a part of that press or a lot of that press. Is it true that you are the first Olympian to ever say the F word on live TV?
Oh, gosh. I doubt that's the case, but it wasn't on TV. There was this little press conference, and we'd just flown to Japan, and we were doing an interview. It might have been the guys and the girls, or just the guys, Ron Quixote, Todd Richards, and I. And they were talking about rivalries, and Todd and I, and, I couldn't say the word rivalry. And, I, under my breath, I was just so tired. And I said that and didn't realize it went kind of through the microphone. So it's not how they portrayed it, but yes, I did say that.
Any fallout from that or just laughs?
Oh, no, just a couple stories about how snowboarders are punks and all that kind of stuff, I think. But yeah, mostly. No, not even that big of a deal usually.
And you're like the clean cut one too. So it's like they can look at you and say you're a punk, but you really...
It wasn't like I was like saying it about someone or something or like that. It was just, I was just overtired and couldn't pronounce a word and kind of whispered it to myself under my breath.
And then when you get home, that's when you realize you're not just a snowboarder anymore. You're an Olympic medalist and everything in your life changes.
Yeah, I wouldn't say everything changes. Still the same person doing the same things. It was just crazy around the area I lived in and at snowboard events for a while.
You come back, then you're allowed in the U.S. Open. You win the U.S. Open that year. Was Terje competing that year?
I actually won the Open in 99. Terje was competing. Rob Kingwell won it in 98. I remember 98 was a foggy day, and I never did so well the year of the Olympics because it was the first time like I'd come home after the Olympics and family, friends, and celebrating and everything. It was just hard to focus. I'd go out there and give it my best shot, but it was always the year after the Olympics that I won my U.S. Opens. But yeah, he competed. Yeah, Rob Kingwell won 98. I won 99. God, I almost won 2000. Guillaume Morset just got me. And then in 03, I won again. I can't remember who won in 02 right now.
Okay. But from that event, after you win that Open, your FIS domination continues. You get a couple of X Games medals on your way to your second Olympics. And this time the games are in the States. Does that change anything for you? Like, is there a lot more pressure to get people tickets and give people time and all the little bullshit that no one really thinks about because it's in your home country?
Gosh, I never really thought of it that way, but yeah, some opportunities came about. And yeah, my mom, brother went, our friends, Gene and Tom Kavanaugh, my uncle. Yeah, some family went, and I think we get certain tickets for being in it. And then, yeah, I think I might have helped out a little with that, but yeah, mostly focusing on just the riding.
At this Olympics, snowboarding is way cooler in terms of how the Olympics want to portray you now. Like, the media is ready to make you guys the media darlings of everything. That's when they're going to start selling snowboarding, it seems like. Can you feel that?
Yeah. Snowboarding had definitely grown a lot. Coming into 2002, it was just, really popular having the Olympics in the States, after 9/11. A little scary. Security was a lot bigger. But, everyone was behind the U.S. athletes, and all the Americans were and rooting for us. And we were lucky there. Pat Melendowski did an awesome job with the half pipe, and the stadium, it might be the biggest snowboard Olympic venue stadium still to date, because it was also the finish of like the Alpine ski racing giant slalom, I believe. So it was a huge stadium. Half pipe was great. Weather was great. Definitely a ton of great riders, and just one of those things. You had to go put it all on the line like a lot of us did. And luckily it worked out for me.
Yep, you're able to continue your dominance. You are the Olympic gold medalist, which has got to be a dream come true. But when you are the Olympic gold medalist, it is like a whirlwind of life from there. Like, you get off that podium, and is it just 24 to 48 hours of madness, of no sleep and interviews, go eat, interview? Is that kind of how it works?
Yeah, like they do like a flower ceremony right at the venue, and then you do the media stuff at the venue, bottom of the half pipe, and then we were rushed down to Salt Lake to do all the media stuff down there. Met up with Danny and JJ for the award ceremony in Salt Lake. I remember the Foo Fighters was playing that night. Dave Grohl brought us in his RV, and we all did a shot of whiskey together before the awards. So that was a cool memory. And then, yeah, just standing up on that podium with Danny and JJ and looking out at the crowd and everyone cheering, just unbelievable. Just an awesome moment.
Now, I will never get to experience a moment like that in my life because my talent really doesn't take me anywhere. But I can imagine that if I were on top of a podium at the Olympics like that, every emotion running through my head would be just like from childhood, going through snowboarding. I mean, do you have that moment? Do you cry? That's really what I'm asking.
It was definitely very emotional. I can't remember if I shed a tear or not, but yeah, just knowing, my mom and brother and friends and family, everyone were out with everyone else cheering us on, and just what an accomplishment, and to actually sweep the podium with my teammates, Danny and JJ. And I think it was the first time since figure skating in 1956 or 1952, I think is what they told us. So just like the perfect experience at an Olympics for sure. Having it in my home country, winning, sweeping the podium with my teammates, beautiful day, did the biggest air I've ever done, favorite trick, the method. Just, unbelievable.
And then for the next few months, it seems like you go on a bender, like a full media tour with stops for contests in between. I can imagine that being fun and exhausting all at the same time. But what's the story behind the scabs on your face during part of that media tour?
Oh, yeah. So it was crazy for a little while. I was still snowboarding, going to events, but I was also just felt like I was going back and forth between LA and New York. So, I'd go to New York, do Letterman. Kelly and I went to Daytona 500 to be a part of that. Back to Utah for closing ceremonies, out to LA for game shows and interviews. And it was actually when I came back home, one of my friends, he's a kickboxer and Taekwondo trainer, and we were messing around in his studio. We were wrestling a little bit, and then he'd just drop me, and my face slid across the carpet some and got all scabbed up. So it was just some horsing around with a buddy, but I definitely made some of those pictures and interviews pretty comical because it looked like I got my butt kicked somewhere else.
Yeah, I would think every interviewer, if they had the balls, would have to ask you what happened to your face.
Yeah.
So the next phase of your career, you're competing, and you have a nonprofit that helps kids like yourself who don't have an easy path to make it in snowboarding, which is awesome. But I guess the next big step for you is to try to make the 06 Olympic team. And you almost make it, or you do make it, you're the alternate. How does that one play out?
06, I remember I got off to a really good start. The first one in Breckenridge, finishing second behind Shaun White. Shaun White was pretty dominant at that time. So he was winning a lot of the events. Mason Aguirre was doing really well. And then once Shaun earned enough points to make the team, he kind of dropped out of taking all those first places. So then it opened up opportunities for others. Unfortunately, I missed it just by a tiny bit and went over to the Olympics to cheer on my teammates and had my gear just in case. And actually, I was watching Snowboard Cross. First time Snowboard Cross was in the Olympics. And one of my good friends, Seth Wescott, won. And that night, we were all celebrating his win. He's like, oh, you got to try this. We grew up doing everything together. You're a great all-around rider. So then it got in my mind, like, maybe I should give this a try. And that's what kind of got me started in the Snowboard Cross side of things.
And while I'm not going to talk about the snowboard cross side of things in the podcast as we're getting towards the hour limit, I am going to talk about Seth Wescott, another Olympic gold medalist, the reason behind you getting into snowboard cross. And for the final part of my show, I have something that I call inappropriate questions. And what I do is I get a friend of yours to ask 3 questions, and they can be anything. And I figured, who better to get than Seth? So I got Seth on the line, and Seth was able to record 3 questions for you. I'm going to cue them up right now and then play you question number 1. So we'll go into Seth's question number 1.
Do you think Daniel Frank partied as hard as you did the night before the 99 World Halfpipe Championships?
Thanks for the question, Seth. Miss you. Hope to see you soon. Anyway, 99, go over to Europe and World Championships halfpipe, and the halfpipe just super verty, and I hate verty halfpipes. So a bunch of our friends were over there and just celebrated, didn't really worry too much about the event. Definitely in rough shape the next day, and went up there and qualified second behind Daniel Frank.
Did Daniel party as hard as you?
No, he wasn't with us. I'd assume not, but power to him if he did.
All right, we'll go with question number 2.
What did you do on your 21st birthday? And again, the next day, how did you happen to land on top of the podium.
There you go.
21st birthday, we were out in, where was that? I know we were out in Tahoe. Let me just think for a sec. I want to say North Star. But anyway, we're out in a Grand Prix out in Tahoe. Qualified, had a good time, and then was off celebrating with my friends. And, next day showed up and just wasn't even going to do the event. I ended up doing it. They gave me one practice run because I was late and fell in my practice run, went up there, put down a good enough run to get second place behind Mark Riley, and definitely upset a lot of people that were competing that day because of that.
Well, it's funny because you came up at a time, we're similar ages, where there wasn't a ton of weed smoking everywhere like there is now, I feel like. But there was a ton of booze everywhere, and like drinking was looked at as cool, and people could go out and party hard the night before, and it wasn't frowned upon the next day as much as it would be now because, it's a serious deal now. Not that it wasn't then, but it's nice to know that while you looked like you were the clean-cut dude, and you were the clean-cut guy, that there was a fun party Ross behind the scenes that not everybody might have known about.
Yeah, we definitely rode hard, played hard. Cool thing about snowboarding is that you kind of just go do it anywhere, train anywhere. People can come see you, and you're so excited to go new places and meet new people, and you just kind of create friends. Lucky enough to have friends all over the world. So yeah, wherever you go, you're psyched to ride, you're psyched to get together, hang out, and yeah, it was a really fun time in snowboarding. I don't know exactly what it's like today, but I know the features have grown a lot, and the tricks that you have to do, I'm sure there's still some of it, but I think it's even more serious now for sure.
Yeah, the risk level has gone up. The amplitude has gone up. The vert and the half pipes has gone up. Everything that you probably like and don't like has increased a lot. So yeah, it's a different world completely. We are going to go with Seth's last inappropriate question.
So Ross, I experienced a ton of blowback because of going down my path with FIS and, being an embracer of the Olympics. And, it feels like I just had a pivot a few years ago with Terje finally kind of accepting me through Baker and all that. But what were your early experiences of being a member of the U.S. team and being an early one to chase the FIS tour versus your crossover and running into people like Hawkinson at ISF events?
We've talked about it a little bit, but...
Yeah, we talked about it a little before. Yeah, like I said, at my time when I was that age, 15, and had the chance to be on the U.S. team and do the FIS World Cup, I had sponsors, but I didn't have the support for them to be able to do the ISF tour. So FIS made it possible for me to do that, in the U.S. team mostly, because they were the ones paying me for me to do the FIS events. So it was just a path. And yeah, no, I always respected the riders on the other tour. Terje, I was a little bit younger than Terje, so I competed with him some, but not a super lot. And then, yeah, riding with Burton, I would go on photo shoots with him and do different things. I remember he didn't compete in the 2002 Olympics, but he was in Utah for him. I saw him the next day, congratulated me, all that kind of stuff. And, went to many of his Arctic Challenge events, which was, a really cool opportunity, and to see Norway and different parts of it. So, yeah, it was my path, not everyone's path, but they gave me the opportunity to make it to the top. And if it wasn't for that, I don't know if I would have. So I got to be thankful for it.
Awesome, man. Well, that is Inappropriate Questions, and that is the podcast. I want to thank you for your time. And when you look at your career, it's like just a study in tenacity. It's like you weren't supposed to be a pro snowboarder. You kind of were born into the mountains, being that your mom was at the cafeteria, but it was like an uphill battle the whole time for you. You didn't have it easy like a lot of other people, and you kept making things happen and making things happen. And while you did FIS, it might not have been the popular thing, but you know what? It put 2 Olympic medals in your pocket, and that's all based on your talent and your tenacity, man. And I thank you for your time and appreciate all you've done for snowboarding.
Awesome. Thank you, Mike, for having me. Best with all your shows. And yeah, great talking to you.
So that was time with Ross Powers. And I know, I kind of blew it. I was in a rush to get out of the studio when we recorded this one. This was the day that it was 103 degrees in Seattle, meaning my studio was about 120 degrees. And I don't know if you knew this, but Jews don't really take well to that kind of heat. I was dripping sweat and I had to go, so I ended things early. And I missed a bunch. Ross alluded to getting into Snowboard Cross through his buddy, Olympic gold medalist Seth Wescott, and Seth thought Ross could do really well in that sport. And Ross did. He just missed making the 2010 Olympic team. And after his final Olympic run, Ross took a job at his high school alma mater. And today, he is the snowboard programming director at the Stratton Mountain School, where he directs a lot of programming, I guess. Actually, I don't know what he does. And I'll blame all of that on climate change because it really was hot in this room. And when I left, I was completely dripping. My shirt, you could wring it out. It was miserable. But overall, what a cool story. I love it when a dude doesn't have the means to make it happen in the world of snow, and he's able to persevere. While talent plays a big part in that, without that focused one-track mind, that shit doesn't happen. That's the podcast for this week. Now it's time for me to read the review of the week, and it's a 5-star review that comes from Gabe's Computer, and it is titled Top Tier. Here's the review. What a wonderful podcast, covering a wide array of athletes and ski industry experts. Always learning new information straight from the horse's mouth. Where most ski podcasts fail, this podcast shines. A revolving door of characters. Well, I want to thank Gabe's Computer for that review, and it kind of reminds me of another review I got a couple weeks back talking about other ski podcasts out there and talking about them repeating themselves all the time. Well, the guy who sent that review in, he sent me his address so he could get his free beanie, because that's what you get when I read your review of the week on the podcast. And I had asked him who was the guy that kept repeating himself, because you know what? I'm not afraid to say who it was. I'm not the one who's talking shit. It was the reviewer who did. And he let me know that it was the Simon Dumont podcast that repeated itself a lot. And unfortunately, the Simon Dumont podcast looks like it's gone. It is no more. It lasted about a year. And when Simon came on my show a year ago, I told him after the show, I said, hey, Simon, when you get ready to launch your own podcast, because he let me know that he was doing my podcast so he could figure out what I was going to do, and then he was going to do a podcast that was different than mine. But I found out his podcast was pretty much very similar to mine, but it came from the athlete's perspective, and I guess it didn't go over very well because from what I'm hearing, he repeated himself a ton. But when Simon was starting his podcast, I let him know that he should work with me. I could help him with the editing, the promotion, and I could make him way bigger than my podcast was. I know with his built-in audience, it would be easy. It would be a no-brainer to make him a success. And somehow that didn't happen. I'm disappointed that Simon didn't call me up and try to work with me. But hey, everybody's got a plan and they don't always work out. His ski career plan did work out. So you know what? That's a lot better than my podcast. So I want to thank Gabe's Computer for that review. I'm sorry to Simon for talking any shit, but you know what? I didn't really listen to your podcast that much. I did listen to an Alex Hall episode, and yeah, it was fine for what it was. That's the review of the week. If you would like to submit a review, I highly appreciate and encourage you to do that. It is very easy to do. All you need to do is first hit the podcast icon on your smartphone. Second, search for the Powell Movement. Third, click my logo. Fourth, scroll down to where you see the stars. Fifth, click how many stars you think I deserve and write a review. It takes about a minute and it's easy. So I want to thank you for that. I want to thank you so much for listening to the podcast week in and week out. And finally, I want to ask you to support my amazing sponsors who make this thing happen. They are the 10 Barrel Brewery, Stanley, Peter Glenn Ski and Sports, Rollerblade, and Alpine Vans. Have a great week, everyone.